Oh, I can't see all the people's.
Welcome to those of you that are just jumping on. We're going to get started in about 1 minute. I'm going to give everyone a chance to get logged in.
Whoops. Hit the keyboard.
That's right. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off, and I'm sure we'll still have some people jumping in to join us. But welcome to the third Fall Forum Webinar Wednesdays from the Oklahoma School Foundations Network. My name is Katy Leffel, and I'm the director of our network. And I'm so pleased to have you join us today to talk about Plan Giving 101. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I just wanted to do a sort of quick commercial that we have one more of these webinars left next week, Wednesday at noon. We will be talking to our newly announced Outstanding Program Award-winning foundations. So we recently awarded our annual Outstanding Program Awards to 3 different school foundations for programs that they've been implementing in their community. They won $1,000 and bragging rights, and we're going to have the opportunity to hear from those folks and hear about their programs next week. So we hope that you'll register now to join us to learn more about their outstanding programs and how they have ideas that might be something that you might be interested in implementing in your community. But today I want to start by introducing our guest speaker, Ms. Jennifer Meckling. She is the Director of Charitable Organization Endowment Programs at the Oklahoma City Community Foundation. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hey, Katy, thank you for having me. This is a delight to be here. And you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording about how wonderful it is to have this technology to be able to reach everybody. So, and it's a double-edged sword. There are problems like you lean on the keyboard and the slide goes in first. But I'm glad everybody's here, and I'm welcome to answer any questions you have, and I'm trying to make this as painless as possible. So if there's nothing else from you, Katy, I'm going to go ahead and dive in.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll just let our participants know you can use either the Q&A function or the chat, and I'll be monitoring that. And then towards the end of our presentation, we'll have a time to answer those questions. So don't be afraid to pop them in there as they occur to you. So I'll let you take it away, Jennifer. Thank you.
Fantastic. So as Katy said, I'm Jennifer Meckling. I'm the Director of the Charitable Organization Endowment Program at the Oklahoma City Community Foundation. That's a lot of words that we put in there. But my job is helping our endowed partners grow their endowments. And several of those endowed partners are school foundations currently. So I am a little bit acquainted with the school foundation model and happy to answer any questions specific to that if you have those questions. Today is going to be just an overview of Plan Giving. It's things you might want to consider if you're going to start a Plan Giving program for your school foundation or to grow a current program. And of course, I unabashedly promote community foundations as a great partner in that pursuit. Community foundations can be a great way to support that effort. They can take a lot of the burden off a small organization and make you shine to the public. So with that, I'll go ahead and dive in. So if this looks at all like how you feel today, unsure, puzzled, confused, lost, baffled, unclear, I assure you that you're not alone. There's nothing intuitive about any of this. Honestly, I think there's nothing intuitive about nonprofit work to begin with, but Plan Giving is also just this additional layer and level up of confusion and complexity. So what I'll try to do today is make it a little less scary and maybe help make it a little bit more approachable and help you see that you might be able to start a Plan Giving program and probably do it without a whole lot of effort. So let's continue on. So what is Plan Giving? I think Plan Giving, the phrase is a bit of a misnomer because it conjures up images of planning for our own demise, or for those of us in the development capacity, asking a donor to think about their own demise. And while that can be a part of Plan Giving, There are many plan gifts that can be given during a lifetime. So you can plan to be strategic about those gifts. And you can do that without the benefit of $1 million in assets. So an endowment actually can be part of planned giving. So being able to contribute to endowments, setting up an endowment, this is what I'm steeped in every single day, so I know it well, that can be part of that strategic giving place. So I would almost rather call it creative giving or strategic giving, because we're just putting a little bit of planning into it. And it's not necessarily just leaving my $1 million estate to a nonprofit. There's a lot of other ways that we can engage with that. So I'll talk about a lot of that today. So I do hope to dispel some of those misconceptions as we go through our slides today, and help you see that maybe planned giving is a little different than you thought before, and you can see in a different light, maybe a little bit more approachable light. So what is planned giving? It's a transfer of assets to a designated nonprofit during a lifetime or as part of an estate plan. So we're transferring assets, which is just a fancy way of saying we're giving a gift. But we're being strategic about it. We're trying to do it in a way that's going to maybe benefit ourselves from a tax standpoint, but also benefit the organization, possibly more than just giving a cash gift would. It's an opportunity for charitable giving in circumstances that might not otherwise allow you to make a gift, or allow that donor to make a charity. Some of those things are like retirement assets, business assets. There are all these different ways, and they can be very complex, but some of them are not so complex, that a donor can give, and can actually give a large gift that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. So it's really giving us a different perspective on giving. I'd like to use one of the examples that I share with our endowed organizations all the time. Is my own personal example, is that I have a life insurance policy that if I were to step out here onto Broadway and get hit by a streetcar, that life insurance policy would become an endowment fund that would pay for a nonprofit leader to get some fundraising training. So that's something that's really near and dear to my heart. It's a way that I can leave a lasting legacy. It's a way that I can leave a gift that isn't taking anything away from my today. And it's just this asset that I've got sitting there is actually a future asset, but with a little bit of planning and a little bit of conversation, I can decide how I'm going to make a difference in the world. And I think almost all of us have assets like that we can think about. So I just want you to take that in as maybe a little bit more personal message, that there's a way for everybody to do a little bit of strategic planning and make a really big difference. So why would we want to launch into planned giving for us? A planned giving program does allow us to have a deeper, and I think more authentic conversations with our supporters. It's an effort that doesn't necessarily reap benefits today. Rather, it plans for long-term sustainable support and enhanced organizational stability for the organization. It can also improve how our supporters view our organization. They can ask themselves, is this a good investment? Can a donor see themselves as a major player in our story? Sometimes painting that picture for them is what allows them to start to see how they can have a transformational impact on what we have going on. So we're giving our donors options, kind of the same way that we give our volunteers options. I like to think of it in that way. We allow our volunteers to help us planning events or manning events or shredding paper or serve on our boards or volunteer in other ways. We can also give donors additional options for giving. It's not always just writing a check or going to a banquet or participating in a golf tournament. So we want to start thinking about ways that we can model that behavior, not necessarily me personally, but with the donors that I'm talking to. So try to create stories around what we'd like to see in some of these planned giving scenarios. It also helps to promote your program, and it gives confidence to the donor that this is sort of a grown-up organization. If you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about we're going to be around here for a while doing what we're doing. I think that tends to give our donors a little bit more confidence in investing in our future. And it also helps secure that future for the organization, and putting those pieces in place, much the same way you might do some work on policy as a board, or putting things in place that will create sustainability for your organization in terms of programmatic aspects. This is a way that we can put some sustainability in place as financial aspects. And then that planned giving piece is actually really looking at it from the donor perspective, because we're asking a donor some really personal questions to dig deep and think about what they want. we're really asking, we're having that conversation from the donor's perspective. We're saying, what would you like to do? What would you like your impact to be? And let's talk about that. It really opens up a whole different field of conversation that we can have with those donors. And it's not all doom and gloom about what's going to happen when you die. It's how can you have an impact, and what do you want that impact to be? So it's a long game, and I know it can be a little scary to launch into it, but we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. But we'll talk about all these bullets here in greater detail as we go forward. So I did want to throw these numbers at you. You'll probably hear these numbers thrown around a lot about the trillions of dollars that the baby boomers have in assets. And while those are impressive numbers, sometimes I think it's kind of hard to reconcile so many zeros with our own personal experience. But do know that like every person has an asset that they could consider as a planned gift. Whether they have the desire to do that or not is really where the art comes in those conversations. But putting it out there that your organization is prepared to talk about strategic giving and has those opportunities lined up is how you can attract those donors and start to have some of those conversations. And it might be as simple as just putting some things on your website, some little snippets that say, hey, we're considering planned gifts. If you'd like to know more, please give us a call. And if you're at the very beginning of that and you don't feel confident even having those conversations, we're happy to have you come in, and any community foundation in your area would be happy to have you come in and have that conversation with you to help that donor see the different options that are available and try to figure out what works best for everybody.
Jennifer, I love that idea of the fact that we can rely on you all to help us have those conversations. And certainly if you already have endowment funds at a community foundation in your area and you have a donor you want to approach, I think that partnership approach would be a way to build your confidence for sure. So thanks for saying that.
Great. Yes. And anybody in Central Oklahoma, feel free to give us a call and we're happy to chat about anything. But if you're outside the Central Oklahoma area, I'm sure you have a community foundation nearby and you can give them a call. So why planned giving? Planned gifts, legacy gifts, and endowments are all closely tied. They're all strategic forward thinking. And because of the next two bullets that I'll explain, your annual gifts that we're asking for every year from our donors tend to come from their income. They're writing a check and they're taking that out of their current income. But those lasting gifts, those major gifts, tend to come from assets. And I want you to think about how those assets came to be. Our donors will have amassed wealth over years, possibly decades, possibly generations. And the thought of giving all that to an organization that might spend it in a budget year might not be so appealing. So having the idea that we can think strategically about these gifts and what we're going to do with them. So not just getting them, not just enticing those gifts, but thinking about that conversation we're going to have with the donor about how will these gifts be used can really make the difference and cause a donor to really want to consider that. So the idea, like I said, of giving a large gift to an organization that might get spent in a budget year or might overwhelm the organization, believe it or not, I've actually seen a large gift cripple an organization because they don't know what to do with it. They go out and buy something big and then they've suddenly inflated their budget by 10 times and they don't know how to support that. Having a plan in place, even if it's just a dream or maybe it's a slow step up of how we might use larger gifts and what we would do with those and how we would strategically use them internally. So again, not just getting the gift, but how we're using the gift and being able to communicate that with your donor that we're going to do this in a really strategic way that's going to provide long-term support. So we're really talking about just a continuation of that relationship with the donor. And I want you to think about any longtime donor that you have, whether they're giving $100 a year or $1,000 a year. At some point, because I know you're thanking them every single year, they know how appreciative you are of that continued support. At some point, they know, there's no spoiler here, that they're no longer going to be here and be able to provide that support. So giving them the opportunity to give a larger gift that would provide that support year over year, such as putting that money into an endowment that would pay back every year, is an opportunity for them to continue their support forever. And it's not something that they might necessarily have considered before. So just putting your head around what that looks like for a donor and what might cause them to think about a larger gift and think about giving from assets is really what we're trying to get to here. So this is a list, and I'm not going to go in deep on any of these of what different planned giving vehicles are, and they range from super easy such as bequests and beneficiary designations. I can go online today and change the beneficiary designation for my insurance policy and make it anybody that I want. I can make it my family, I can make it a nonprofit. In general, you'll want to let a nonprofit know if you actually do that, but it's really easy to do. Others on this list can be very, very complicated. So, but I wanted you to know that there's just a lot of different ways that we can do it. If a donor comes to you and says, hey, I'm interested in a charitable gift annuity, and you're like, oh, that sounds great, let me call my friends at the Community Foundation and see what we can do on that. We can help you through some of those more complicated ones. But like I said, if they have a financial planner, or even if they've got their own insurance policy, they can log on and make those changes. So putting it out there that there are those opportunities for your donor is really, really important. And like I said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just want to keep doing what we're doing and take advantage of our current modes of communication. So if we've got a website, we're sending out emails, maybe we have a printed newsletter or an e-newsletter, we can put little snippets in there talking about planned giving, modeling some ideas of what we have, and maybe even pointing out some of the math of what it would take to sustain an organization. And I'll get to that in just a second, talking about that math piece of it. So one of the big pieces is being able to define the impact of what a gift could do for the organization. And all these things, these bullets that you see here, are kind of tools that I would encourage you to have sort of in place for donor conversations. So you should know what the impact of a particular gift could do for your organization. You should have a pretty good handle on the impact of what you're doing in the community and what your mission is. But the idea of how much would you need to sustain a particular program or service, that's really good to have that in your head, to know. If somebody said, hey, I'm thinking about something transformational, or maybe I'm receiving an inheritance myself and I'm thinking that I would rather give that to you, what are some ideas you have? Having those ideas in your head of what does it take to sustain this program? What would it take to expand something we've always dreamed of being able to offer? And just breaking that down to some numbers that you can just sort of snap off there. I like to use an example of a camp. I know a nonprofit organization that runs a camp every year, and they send out cards every year asking for their donors to support a kid through camp. So $400 gift will put a kid through camp every year. And we looked at that one year and I said, you know, I know that some of your donors would appreciate knowing that if instead of giving you $400 a year, they gave you a single gift of $8,000 and you put that into endowment, that would give you back that $400 a year, every year, forever. And that would actually grow over time. The way the Community Foundation's endowments works here is it gives you 5% of the full endowment value, and then any investment performance above that goes back into the fund. So it would continue to grow over time. So that idea of I can give you $400 a year for as long as I'm alive is great. Or I can give you $8,000 and put it into an endowment, and that endowment is going to continue to give $400 a year forever. So putting your head around what that might mean for your organization, just in terms of that one example of endowment, of how someone can continue to support your organization for a really long time with, you know, not, I wouldn't call an $8,000 gift a completely transformational gift, but it is something that's going to make a big difference for your organization in the future. Does that all make sense?
It does, Jennifer. I love thinking about it that way. I mean, tying something like that. I mean, that hits home for me. I'm a camp person, and my husband and I actually give, you know, camp scholarships to the camp where we met every year. But looking at the numbers difference there, I mean, that's kind of mind blowing to me to think about the fact. I mean, $8,000 wouldn't, like you said, it's certainly not just an easy check to write, but it's also not an out of the ballpark thing to consider when you're looking at leaving a legacy to an organization that you're really passionate about. So I love that shift in that framework. But like you said, you have to have done the background work to know how are you pairing those numbers to those outcomes so that it speaks to a donor like that. So thanks for bringing that example up. I love that.
Well, and thank you for framing it that way. I think it's really great. So the math on that is just times 20. Whatever you have, you come down to that lowest denominator, that's times 20 would endow that forever. So it's a really neat thing to just sort of be able to throw out there if you're talking to a donor. So I do want to encourage you to start having those conversations. You know, once you maybe have some ideas in your head of what that could be, if you already have an endowment, you've already got a base there where you could actually ask people to invest in your endowment for a particular cause. If you don't have an endowment and you want to talk about it, contact your local community foundation and they'd be happy to help you with that. But I do want you to at least start thinking about having those conversations with donors. And they're not asks, they're conversations. They might be longtime donors or a founding board member maybe, and just start the conversation. And you may not get a gift out of it, but I think you'll at least get increased understanding and maybe a deeper rapport with that particular donor. And it might also serve to get them excited about the prospect of giving or getting a planned gift. So helping those donors understand what they could plan for and how they might be able to model that behavior for others. Because really it's this wonderful snowball effect. Once you have one of those great planned gifts in place, you can start talking about that. And then another donor might see it and say, oh, I could do that. Wow, I didn't realize that $8,000 would do that. And I could just leave $8,000 out of my insurance policy and the whole rest of it will go to my family, and whatever works for that donor. But they're not generally going to come up with that on their own. Or if they do, you want to be the nonprofit that's in front of them when they do. So that's why I say get that message out there as much as you can, just to say, hey, we'd be happy to talk to you about a planned gift. And here are some ideas. And then it happens to land in front of them on the day that they're thinking about their taxes. And they think, oh my gosh, I've got to take a required minimum distribution from my retirement account and I'm going to get taxed on it. Gee, I could just give that to a nonprofit and here's their newsletter sitting in front of me. That's the ideal scenario, right? So you just want your message to be out there as much as you can and to be talking about it as an option. Like I said, it's not an ask, it's really just a conversation.
I love that.
So thinking about those donors, regardless of the gift size, that have been faithful to your organization for 5, 10, 15 years, those are the people that you may want to have a conversation with. And like I said, it doesn't have to be an ask. It can be a, hey, we're thinking about starting a planned giving program, or we're thinking about starting a legacy society. What do you think about that? Would you support that? Do you think you might be able to help us put some parameters around it? And then they might actually have some input as to what will work and what won't for your particular donor population. Longtime volunteers, another great opportunity to start talking about that. I've seen cases of longtime volunteers that only gave minimally while they were alive and then left an amazing estate to an organization. And that's a wonderful gift to get, but wouldn't it have been great to have been able to have that conversation with that volunteer while they were alive and know that they had planned this. So you can have those conversations, you can broach those conversations and maybe, again, give them some ideas of how their gift might make a difference for your mission. Yeah, the question of are donors convinced that the work you do will be needed far into the future? I think certainly for school foundations, that's got to be a strong yes. We're always going to be needed. We're always going to have to support what's going on. So I don't think there's ever going to be a case where that's not a strong case to make. And then why, do you know why your loyal donors are consistent in their giving and what motivates them? So that's possibly another conversation to have. Someone that has given to you for a long time, why do they continue to give? What gives them the passion to keep doing that? And sometimes just having that conversation might open up some additional avenues for larger gifts or possibly those planned gifts. We have any questions yet?
No questions yet.
Excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about institutional readiness. So is your organization able to launch out on a planned giving program? And like I said, I don't want you to go reinvent the wheel and create a big thing. There are plenty of like platforms out there that you can pay money to that will put a planned giving thing together for you, and then you'll have space on their website. I don't recommend that right out of the box. I think just creating awareness to begin with is really where you need to start. And you might find that having some of those conversations is going to be enough to get the ball rolling. Well, so a couple of the things that I would like to see you consider as a board before you do launch off into a planned giving program is number one, our gift acceptance policy. So one of the things I strongly recommend for any nonprofit is at the very least, have a gift acceptance policy that acknowledges that if unusual or unexpected large gifts come in, that they have to go before the board to be approved, to be accepted. At least gives you a little bit of breathing room to decide if this is a gift that makes sense for us to accept. Things like real estate can be really tricky. I had an organization get offered a truck full of taxidermatized animals.
Yeah.
And they didn't know how to say no. So now they've got a warehouse full of taxidermatized animals. Giving yourself that breathing space to say as a board, hey, does this make sense for us to accept this? And like I said, real estate can be tricky. And that's one of those areas that, again, your community foundation probably has resources to help you match up the seller, the donor with a buyer and liquidate that asset and have it go to your organization without you having to do all that legwork. So generally, that's the kind of thing that we do all day, every day, and we can help with that.
Jennifer, I'll also throw out, I definitely have lots of sample gift acceptance policies that are even school foundation specific. And so if that's something that anyone on the call is interested in, please reach out to me and I certainly can share with you what I have.
That makes me so happy. I mean, it really is. I know it feels like it's down in the weeds, that kind of policy work, but it really becomes important and it becomes something you can lean on. When those odd things come up, you say, hey, actually, we have policy about this. Somebody thought about this and they wrote it down, and now we're going to adhere to that policy. Some other things I'll recommend that you might consider in a gift acceptance policy, if you do get into some serious planned giving, is diverting an annual amount into an endowment. So if we have a budget each year and we have a fundraising goal, if we make anything above that fundraising goal, just sock that away into endowment, much like you would for your own investments. Creating consistent process for those large gifts. So if you do find that you're starting to see some estate gifts or see larger major gifts come in, putting that in policy so that we know what to do with it. And we can say X% of larger unexpected gifts always go into an endowment or go into some long-term savings to make sure that we sort of resist the temptation of that windfall and don't go spend it on something big that we need to maintain.
Right.
And that creates a necessity to adhere to your current budget, which I know could be difficult for some of us. And then outsourcing the kind of things that, again, a community foundation and other resource partner could help with, gifts of tangible property, again, helping you understand what to do with that and what the implications are, whether it makes a good sense for your organization. Tax filing can get a little complicated if you get some of those non-cash gifts. Investment options, we can certainly help with that. Any community foundation can help with that. If you have received a big gift and your board has made the decision to invest it, it might make sense to consider a community foundation as one of your partners. There's nothing wrong with spreading that money around to different institutions. In fact, it's a really, really good idea. So we can help sort out some of the options for that. And our community foundation in particular offers, we will underwrite a charitable gift annuity. That's where we take in an asset and then we pay the donor in an annual or monthly amount based on that annuity, and then whatever's in the remainder will go to your organization. That can get tricky for a small organization because you're basically taking a chance on when you think this donor might pass away and take on that risk for you. So there are a lot of things that a community foundation or another institutional partner could do to help you with if you feel a little overwhelmed.
And it's easy to feel overwhelmed, especially if you're like me, Jennifer, and you're not really like a finance tax person, right? You can feel out of depth quickly with some of these different issues. So it's great to know that you guys have resources to help us out.
Good. Happy to help anytime, answer any questions, have a conversation. That's what we do. So again, I'll plug the benefits of a community foundation. So professionally managed funds with low fees. If you've got your own investments, every gift that goes into that investment pool is generally going to have with it an investment fee. Because we have 378 organizations, we invest it all in one big chunk. So we're not investing every single gift that comes in as it comes in. We're investing all of our gifts at the end of the month into the investment pool. So that's how we keep our fees low, and we spread that among all the organizations so that you don't have to pay for everybody else's investments. Networking and technical assistance. Almost every community foundation that has a program like this will help you with connecting you with other organizations in the area that are doing the same thing. Here at OCCF, we have monthly workshops for our endowed organizations, and we help them not only teach them things, but there's so much value in just being in the same room and breathing the same air with other nonprofit people, so you feel less alone and you don't feel like your question's a stupid one, and you can just hear the conversations that your peers are having with their donors and maybe take some inspiration from that. So that networking and that technical assistance, I think, is invaluable. And again, as we talked about large and unusual gift acceptance, we can help with that. If somebody does offer a piece of property and you think, boy, that's going to be a lot of work talk to your local community foundation. I guarantee they can help you liquidate that and get a nice gift for you and put it into an endowment. Exposure to a committed donor base. So in addition to our endowment program and our scholarship program, we actually have donor funds here. So that's a fund that a donor has given to the community foundation. They've gotten their tax benefit up front, and then they can over time decide where that money is going to go in the community each year. And that's a group of people that have obviously become very strategic about the way they're giving. And those are great donors for you to have conversations with. So if you find that one of our donors, a donor advisor, has given a gift to your organization, treat that check like it's a little gem that you just found, because it really is. That's a different kind of donor and someone that you really can have one of those conversations with. And gift tracking, if you're actually receiving gifts through a community foundation, we're actually doing all the legwork for that. So for any of our endowed organizations, we receive gifts here. We send out all of the acknowledgements, the tax letters. They get everything from us. And then there's a permanent record. All of our funds have an online portal that they can log into and see who's given to their fund, dating back to, well, 1969, actually.
Oh my gosh.
So a lot of names in there. But that gift tracking becomes an important piece. And if you already do have an endowment and you've got it someplace else, I do want to just remind you what amazing gifts all these people in the past have given to your organization. And every year when you pick up that check, know that everybody that gave is contributing to that. So this is this wonderful opportunity for gratitude on an annual basis for somebody who's giving you a gift that's going to continue to give back. When you now have an opportunity to express your gratitude every single year. It's absolutely a wonderful thing, and I never grow tired of it.
Oh, that's a lot of fun.
And then OCCF, and I know a lot of other community foundations around the state have matching opportunities. So if you choose to give into your endowment or to run a campaign to entice other people to give into your endowment, you can actually get some matching dollars into that. Kirkpatrick Family Fund offers a 1 to 3 match for our endowed organizations, and organizations can apply for that every single year. So it's an opportunity for them to boost their endowment fund by 33% every single year, regardless of what the market does. Oh, and I also want to put in a plug for our scholarship team here. We have over 800 scholarships. We're the largest independent scholarship network in the state. We just had a bunch of nonprofits in here this morning talking about our scholarship program, trying to raise awareness. And believe it or not, there are a lot of scholarships that go unawarded every year because we can't find the kids to fill them and to accept them. So I want to put a plug in for our team. They do a really fantastic job trying to get kids matched up with those scholarships. And I say kids, some of our scholarships are actually what we call last mile scholarships, trying to help people get through those last couple of years of school or possibly even continuing ed. We have scholarships, I think, for just about everybody. Some of our scholarships have GPA caps because we know that the kids that are those merit scholars are getting scholarships elsewhere. We want to make sure that we get to them and give them the scholarships that they need to get through school. So if any of you deal with scholarships and possibly even award your own scholarships, fantastic, but also point them toward occf.org for additional scholarships. It's a pretty simple process. We try to have a one application process. Occasionally there will be a scholarship that requires some additional essay work at the other end, but they can upload their information one time and it will tell them which scholarships they would be eligible to apply for. And that process is actually open right now.
I love that, Jennifer. And just to our guests on the webinar, I've spoken with Jennifer a couple of times about this. I know many school foundations that are looking to sort of get out of the scholarship business and managing those scholarships on their own, and partnering with the community foundation can be a great way to continue that donor intent, to make sure that that relationship's not damaged, to get the funds to kids as has always been intended, but for that to not eat up all the capacity that your school foundation has. So just something to consider. Yep.
And, it still gets awarded in the same way. It goes to the bursar's office with the kid's student number on there. And if you've been present at award ceremonies every year, you can still continue to be present at those award ceremonies every year, which I each year usually get to go to some of those. And it is so delightful. I feel like I'm launching somebody off into the rest of their life, and it feels so good. So I so admire what you all do.
No, listen, giving those scholarships and then grant patrol days when you get to give teachers their grants are two school foundation favorites for sure.
Fantastic. So to dive a little bit deeper into endowment, just to try to connect the dots for you, an endowment kind of shows fiduciary responsibility for an organization, and it does paint a picture of a sustainable future for your organization. Honestly, there's no scenario where endowment is not a better answer to a long-term need. It will always give back eventually more than has ever been put into it. Sometimes that give back number is 13 years, sometimes it's 15 years, but it will always give back more than it's given into it. And then it will continue to give from that point on. So you're really just kind of painting this picture of a sustainable, grown-up sort of organization that we've got it together, we're planning for our future, and we're going to make it happen. So you're giving your donors the opportunity for really lasting impact and to be part of that future. And that's a really good feeling for a lot of our donors. They like to engage, and there are certainly, I will acknowledge, there are certainly donors out there that want to give today and have it be spent today, and they're all about that. But some of them also want to think about the future and think about, how do I continue to give even after I'm gone? And endowment is one of the really great tools out there that will be able to do that. Again, it's one of the best ways to incentivize creative giving, is to just model it and to have an endowment out there. I won't belabor the endowment piece. So our key takeaways, building an endowment or building a planned giving program is really just building that culture of legacy, right? It's a long game. You got to be in it for a while. I've seen organizations say, well, we tried a planned giving program for a year and it didn't work. Well, it's much longer than that. We have to think about what's going to do in the future. I have a colleague here who's been here for 20 years, and he's just today reaping some of the benefits of the work that he did when he first got here, is developing those relationships and talking to those donors about what they wanted to do for the future. Again, it's a proactive and not a reactive endeavor. So we have to put it out there. Sometimes our donors just give in the way that we ask. If we ask them to buy a ticket to a dinner, they will. If we ask them to participate in a golf tournament, they will. Sometimes if we ask them to give into an endowment or to think about a legacy gift, they might then consider that as well. So we have to be proactive and put it out there and help them see how they can make a big difference for our mission, our community. Again, what we talked about at the beginning is just trying to shift that perspective a little bit and think about it from the donor's perspective. What does the donor want to get out of this? What legacy do they want to have? I've seen many donors actually name scholarship funds for their mother, their father, their children. They want that person to be remembered, and they want to do that in a long-term sustainable way. And this kind of thing is exactly what they're looking for. They don't always know that it's out there. They don't always know that endowment or planned giving is an option. So it's up to us to put the message out there that this is an option for you, and we'd love to talk to you about it. So I want to encourage you to create your own stories. Like I said, if you don't have any planned gifts in the works right now, start looking inside, start talking to your board or maybe some founding members and say, hey, is there something we can put out there that would model this for everybody else? Maybe as a board, we're going to commit to everybody leaving $1,000 of their estate to our nonprofit and make that the first legacy fund or something like that. Then we can start to talk about that. So getting the people that are currently engaged with your organization engaged in a deeper strategic way then creates those stories that you can share with everybody else, and we're modeling that behavior for them. It really is about showing our donors how they can have the impact that they know they want deep in their heart. They just don't know how to get there. And it's up to us to really invite them into that inner circle and say, this is how we can do it. And this is how we can make a difference. I want you to create your own stories.
Yeah, Jennifer, I was just going to say, I love that as an example of starting with your own board, because I know a lot of people, when they look at this and think about it, it's, how do I start those conversations? Who do I start those conversations with? And I think that's a really smart, natural place to start. Some other things that I've seen, just to throw out there, that I think open that door. I've seen school foundations do in memoriam gifts. And then also have the ability, to post that on their website and show that they are receiving those in memoriam gifts. I think that is just you're planting the seed in your donors' minds that, oh, this is an organization that's doing that sort of thing, and that maybe they'll think of you should that occasion arise. Can you think of other examples like that of just sort of ways to kind of start the conversation?
Yeah, I've seen organizations actually leverage a large gift as a matching gift. So a donor says, hey, I would really like to start a scholarship fund, and I'd like to call it the Jennifer Meckling Scholarship. How about I'll put up $10,000 and we try to raise an additional $10,000 out of that. Or rather than the Jennifer Meckling, I'm going to honor my mother, and it will be in her name, and people will remember her as their 5th grade math teacher, and they'll want to give to that fund. Lots of ways to leverage gifts, especially if you do start to have those deeper conversations and you have a donor says, I want to make a difference with a big gift. We can leverage that gift and make it a match and try to inspire other people to give.
Jennifer, something that just came up in the chat, this is from Elizabeth Embody, who's the director of the Jinx Foundation. And she says, we're taking the first step towards starting a planned giving program, which, way to go, Elizabeth. I know a lot of foundations are working hard to get this going. She says, we're in the beginning stages of working with a financial group that works annually with our teachers and employees to support them with their personal financial goals. So that's a unique idea too. If you have a group like that as a school foundation that you know is working with your teachers and with other school employees, to talk with them about getting your foundation into the conversation. I think that would be a smart entry with people who are obviously already deeply passionate about your organization, if they're spending their careers working there.
I think that's a great idea. And again, it's sometimes people won't even think about it. They'll be doing their own financial planning and tend to think of it as, I don't have $1 million to leave. I want to make sure my family's taken care of. Don't realize they could leave a percentage, they could leave a dollar amount. It could be what seems like a small gift in the bigger scheme of an entire estate, but it can make a huge difference for an organization to receive that gift. And the same thing goes true with property. Very often when people get gifted houses, they're not the best houses, but if we go ahead and liquidate that house and we end up with a $60,000 benefit from that, and we put that into an endowment, that's a $60,000 endowment. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's huge. Another really sort of intriguing idea I heard from another school foundation leader. She mentioned that she goes usually annually to talk with a local group of attorneys that do estate planning, and that she kind of gives them information about their foundation, just that's something that they can have in the back of their minds if they're working with and advising clients on their estate plans, to know that her organization, if someone's passionate about education, might be a good fit for them. And I thought that was an intriguing way to think about things too.
Yeah, and we know that all those estate planners went to school somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. But just, I like that idea, both Elizabeth's idea here of widening your thought process on who you're approaching, that it may not just be your donors, it may not just be your board, but looking at with schools, who all else are stakeholders that are really passionate and who, may not, teachers especially, have the funds out of pocket every year to be a big donor, but could be someone who wants to remember that legacy of their service to the school with a planned gift. So I love thinking about that.
Wonderful idea. Wonderful idea.
Yeah. And just a follow-up comment here, planned giving is the answer to growing our investment. Our current donor base is interested in investing in current educational needs and opportunities. And so I love that distinction. It is a real challenge for school foundations. A lot of our donors want to feel like they're impacting kids right now, and meeting the needs of the classroom that their child is in right now, or that their grandchild is in right now. And so, Elizabeth, I think you're right on in identifying the fact that we, as school foundations, we really need to focus on some of those planned gifts to help be that long-term, Jennifer, as you've mentioned, that stability factor, when a lot of our donors want their right now gifts to go to a particular project that is speaking to them. So that's a great perspective.
As I said, it's proactive, planting that seed for them. They're probably not going to get there on their own, but the idea that they're giving support today for today, and the idea that tomorrow they may not be around to give that support. So putting some planning in place so that the fund then can continue to give to them is a great idea.
Yeah. The other idea that I really like is thinking about, if you do identify a few people, especially maybe some of your board members or some of your longtime supporters, that are leaving a planned gift, like you said, to communicate that somehow, maybe share that story with your larger, wider audience, because it may plant the seed. Oh, I haven't thought about that. especially if that person, you know, a lot of times our board members and some of those long-term volunteers tend to be people that are pretty well respected in our school communities. And so to hear from some of those people, oh, they're making plans for, you know, for the long-term health of this organization, that's something I could consider too. So I like that idea of using that approach to be able to find some short stories to share.
Yep, absolutely. And if you're looking for stories, just something to inspire you, you go to OCCF's website, occf.org/stories. You can see all of our videos there, and they're just wonderful stories of everyday people who just wanted to be a little bit more strategic about the way they gave, and it made a big difference. One of our biggest funds, the Margaret Annis Boys Trust, which is a parks and beautifications fund, was Margaret Annis Boys was a school teacher, and she retired childless and decided that she really wanted to make a difference in the community, and she left a fund that 50 years later is still making things beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. Well, anyone else on the call, any other questions, throw them up in the Q&A as we look to kind of start wrapping up. Jennifer, I will definitely post your email address kind of along with some of the information, that I post in conjunction with this webinar when I put up the recording and the slides, so that people can feel free to reach out to you directly. But certainly also most of you have, I think, have my information. And so feel free to reach out to me as well too. And I can get you in touch with Jennifer, or I can help you try to identify a community foundation that is in your area and get you connected with them if you're outside of sort of the central Oklahoma area.
Yeah, and Katie, that gift acceptance policy, again, if you don't have one, that is so important. Get some basics in there, at the very least, to give your board a little bit of breathing space to consider an especially unusual or large gift.
Yeah, I can't stress enough, like it is one of those things that you look at and you think, oh, I mean, do we really need that? But yes, you kind of do. And you need it before someone comes at you with something strange and difficult. Because then if you have the policy, it's not personal. You can go back to that donor and say, oh my gosh, this is such a generous offer, but we actually have a policy in place that, means that we can't take your taxidermy truck full of, amazingness. So thank you for thinking of us, but we're going to have to pass on this one.
Yeah, timeshares, cemetery plots, all kinds of things get offered.
Oh my gosh, I bet you have some serious stories. I love it. Well, Jennifer, I'm not seeing anything else pop up. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing with us today. This is really valuable information and hopefully encouragement for our school foundations, that there are some really simple first steps that you can take, and that this isn't like a thing that you do and then check the box. If you're doing plan giving well, it's just going to be a part of what you do forever, in an ongoing conversation and an ongoing way that we speak with our donors. So I love the examples you've given today, and just hope that everybody else is finding them as helpful as I am, about sort of relaxing us and knowing that plan giving, like you said, doesn't have to be about chatting about your upcoming demise. It can be much more centered on sort of your priorities and how you can keep living your values out past the time that you're gone. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you, everyone. It's a delight this morning.
Take care, everybody. Hope to see you next week for Outstanding Program Awards. Bye.